Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another gentle journey into the distant past. Tonight, we set sail across the great oceans, aboard the creaking wooden ships of the age of exploration. This was a time of daring voyages and discoveries, of maps with blank spaces, and of sailors who risked life and limb to cross vast, uncharted waters. Yet behind the stories of bold explorers and glittering conquests lies another truth, one less often told. For the sailors themselves, life aboard these ships was anything but glorious. It was a daily battle against hunger, disease, superstition, and the merciless sea. The rhythm of their lives was shaped by back-breaking labor, harsh discipline, and an endless struggle to survive. So tonight, as you relax and settle in, I invite you to imagine yourself stepping aboard one of these ancient vessels. The deck sways beneath your feet. The scent of salt and tar fills the air. The distant cry of gulls fades behind you as the ship drifts further from land and into the deep unknown. We will follow the sailors through their long voyages, from the humblest shores to the grandest expeditions. We will hear of their hopes and fears, their small comforts and great hardships. We will wander through forgotten mysteries and glimpse the lives of those who ruled from the distant shores. Let the steady flow of this history carry you gently, like the slow rocking of the sea. There's no need to stay awake. Whether you drift into sleep or simply rest, you are welcome here. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. Swabbing the deck, life below sails imagine. The first light of dawn breaking over the deck of a great sailing ship. The sea lies calm, a vast expanse of gray and blue stretching in all directions. The wooden planks beneath your feet are slick with salt and spray. The sails, heavy with dew, creak and shift in the morning breeze. Below decks, the air is thick and close. The wooden beams loom low, and every surface seems worn smooth by the touch of countless hands. The narrow spaces are dark and damp, lit only by the dim glow of lanterns swinging from the ceiling. This is where the sailors live and sleep, crammed into hammocks or rough wooden bunks. Privacy is a luxury unknown here. The scent of unwashed bodies, old wood, and stale air fills the cramped quarters. Each day begins early. A harsh voice calls out, rousing the men from uneasy slumber. There's no choice but to rise quickly and report for duty. The first chore of the morning is often the same, swabbing the deck. With buckets of seawater hauled up from the waves, sailors scrub the wooden boards clean of grime and debris. It is tiring, repetitive work, made harder by the constant pitch and roll of the ship. Yet it must be done. A clean deck is a safer deck, and the officers will tolerate no neglect. Above, the officers watch with sharp eyes. The sailors know better than to slack off. Punishment for laziness or disrespect is swift and harsh. A flogging with the cat o' nine tails can leave a man scarred for life. The rhythm of their lives is bound by strict discipline and constant toil. Throughout the day, there is little rest. The crew is divided into watches, each responsible for certain duties at set times. There are ropes to be coiled, sails to be trimmed, and repairs to be made. The ship is a living thing, demanding constant care. Wood swells and shrinks with the changing weather. Sails wear thin and must be patched. Lines fray and need splicing. Every sailor must know his tasks well, for mistakes at sea can prove fatal. Mealtimes bring no great relief. The food aboard ship is meager at best. Hardtack biscuits, salted meat, and perhaps some dried peas or beans. The biscuits are often riddled with weevils, the meat tough and salty. Fresh water is carefully rationed, stored in barrels that may grow foul over time. There is no choice but to drink it, along with a daily ration of weak beer or watered-down wine. Conversation among the crew is subdued. They speak of home, of loved ones left behind, of the dangers that lie ahead. Superstitions run deep. Many sailors believe in omens, in signs from the sea and sky. A sudden change in the wind, a bird seen far from land, the shape of a cloud, all may be read as portents of fortune or doom. When work is done, there is little in the way of comfort. The sailors gather below decks, sharing stories or playing simple games with dice or cards. Music is rare, but sometimes a sailor with a fiddle or a voice will lift the spirits of the crew. Yet even in these moments, the constant sway of the ship and the creak of the timbers remind them of their isolation. Night brings its own challenges. The darkness is profound, broken only by the flicker of lanterns and the pale light of the stars. The ship groans and shifts with each wave. Sleep comes fitfully, disturbed by the cold, the damp, and the noises of the sea. Rats scurry in the shadows, an unwelcome but familiar presence. The sailors dream of land, of warm meals and soft beds. But for now, their world is bounded by wooden walls and endless water. The days blur into one another, a constant cycle of labor, hunger, and weariness. And yet, this is life for those below sails. A life of hardship and endurance, of small triumphs and quiet camaraderie. The rhythm of their lives moves with the tide, steady and unyielding. As the voyage stretches on, the realities of life at sea become more deeply etched into every sailor's body and mind. The weariness of long days spent toiling beneath the sun, the aches from pulling heavy ropes, and the sting of salt in raw, chapped skin are constant companions. Even for the young and strong, the physical toll is undeniable. Blisters harden into calluses. Muscles ache from the strain of climbing, rigging, and hauling sails. Every movement must be careful and deliberate, for one false step on the slick timbers can mean a painful fall or worse, being pitched overboard into the vast sea. Above all, there is the relentless monotony. The sea itself is an ever-changing presence, but to the human eye, it can seem an endless sameness. Day after day, only the horizon greets the sailors. No sight of land, no new faces, just the familiar creak of wood and the sigh of the wind through the sails. This isolation weighs heavily on the crew. Time stretches, each hour marked only by the ship's bell and the changing of the watch. Below decks, conditions worsen with the passing weeks. Dampness creeps into every corner. Clothing grows musty, bedding damp. The cramped quarters become breeding grounds for lice and fleas, adding to the sailors' discomfort. Disease, ever a lurking threat, finds fertile ground here. Fevers, infections, and skin ailments spread swiftly among the men. The ship's surgeon, if one is aboard, does what he can, but supplies are limited and knowledge of medicine is rudimentary. Yet the human spirit endures. Among the crew, bonds form. Friendships are forged through shared hardship. An experienced sailor might take a younger one under his wing, teaching the ways of the ship and the sea. A quiet humor often surfaces, a way to ease the burden of long days. Nicknames, playful jests, and tales of past voyages bring moments of lightness to an otherwise grim existence. Officers maintain strict order, for discipline is the backbone of life aboard ship. A breakdown of command could mean disaster. Even the smallest infraction is punished severely, for an unruly crew can spell mutiny or chaos. Still, beneath the surface of obedience, there often simmers a quiet resentment. Many sailors are pressed men, forced into service against their will. Others are drawn by desperation or the hope of pay. Few truly choose this life for love of the sea alone. Occasionally, the routine is broken by the arrival of a ship in sight. The cry of sail ho brings a surge of excitement and apprehension. Will it be friend or foe? A merchant vessel, a navy ship, or a pirate. The crew rushes to their stations, readying the guns if needed, their hearts racing in the otherwise slow rhythm of their voyage. When storms arise, the true danger of the sailor's life is laid bare. The calm is shattered. The sky darkens, winds howl, and towering waves batter the ship. In these moments, survival demands every ounce of skill and courage. Sails must be reefed, ropes secured, water bailed from the hold. Fear grips the crew, yet they work with grim determination. Many a sailor has been swept overboard in such tempests, lost without trace. In calmer times, the sailor's thoughts often turn inward. Long hours on watch provide ample time for reflection. Memories of home, of family and loved ones haunt their minds. Letters from home, if they ever arrive, are treasured. Each scrap of news, each familiar word, offers a fleeting connection to a world beyond the endless sea. As weeks turn to months, weariness seeps into the bones. The simple act of standing a watch or hauling a line grows harder. The longing for land, for solid ground beneath their feet, becomes an ache in the soul. Yet the sailors press on, for the voyage must continue. There is no turning back, no escape from the wooden world in which they live. Thus, the life below sails is one of endurance and quiet fortitude. A life shaped by the sea, ruled by discipline, and marked by a constant struggle against the elements. As you rest now, imagine the gentle sway of the ship, the creak of timbers, and the endless rhythm of the waves. The sailor's life, though harsh, moves ever forward, bound to the tides and the vastness of the ocean. Chapter 2. Starvation and Scurvy. The sailor's diet as the weeks of a long voyage stretch into months. Another shadow begins to loom over the sailors, more insidious than storms or shipwrecks. It is hunger. The slow, knowing emptiness of a belly that has long since forgotten true satisfaction. At first, rations are adequate, even if plain. The ship sets out with barrels of salted beef and pork, sacks of dried peas, casks of ale or watered wine, and hardtack biscuits that might keep for many months. There may even be dried fruit, cheese, and perhaps a barrel or two of flour. But time, moisture, and pests conspire to rob these stores of their meager quality. Hardtack, a dry, dense biscuit, becomes the staple of every meal. At first, it is merely tough and bland. Soon, the sailors begin to notice the weevils. Small black beetles burrow into the biscuits, laying their eggs in the dense, floury interior. By the time the ship is well at sea, nearly every biscuit is infested. Yet the men eat them all the same. They may tap the biscuit sharply to shake the insects loose, or simply close their eyes and chew, grateful for any sustenance at all. The salted meat fares no better. Packed in brine to preserve it, the pork and beef grow hard and fibrous over time. The salt draws out what little moisture remains, leaving behind hunks of meat nearly impossible to chew. The sailors may soak it in water to soften it or boil it into a greasy broth. The smell is strong, the flavor overpowering, but hunger leaves little room for complaint. Fresh food vanishes quickly. Without refrigeration, fruits and vegetables spoil within days. Once the ship is far from land, there will be no more citrus, no greens, no fresh bread. The monotony of the diet begins to take its toll. Meals blend into one another, each as unappetizing as the last. Appetite wanes, but the body demands fuel for the hard labor of the day. Yet it is not mere hunger that stalks the sailors. There's a greater danger, one they scarcely understand. Without fresh produce, the body is deprived of vital nutrients. The sailors know nothing of vitamins, but they know the symptoms of what they call scurvy. At first, it is fatigue. Muscles ache with unnatural weakness, and wounds heal slowly. Then the gums swell and bleed, teeth loosen. Bruises appear on the skin without cause, and old scars reopen. The legs grow swollen and painful, making it difficult to stand or climb. In the final stages, death comes slowly, through infection or the collapse of vital organs. There is no cure aboard ship. The only hope is to find land and secure fresh provisions. Lemons, limes, or even green vegetables can halt the disease, though few understand why. Some captains, wise through bitter experience, stock their ships with vinegar or preserved citrus juice, but many do not. The cost is high, and space aboard ship is precious. As scurvy spreads, the ranks of the crew thin. Those too weak to work are confined below decks, their groans echoing through the cramped quarters. The ship's surgeon, armed with little more than rough tools and outdated remedies, can offer scant help. The healthy sailors must take up the duties of their fallen comrades, their own strength taxed to the limit. Hunger is not the only torment. The ship's stores of water begin to spoil. Barrels once filled with fresh, cool water now yield a cloudy, foul-tasting liquid. Algae bloom in the darkness of the hold. Yet the sailors must drink, for thirst is merciless. They may add a ration of beer or watered wine to mask the flavor, but it is poor comfort. Dehydration can creep in unnoticed, sapping strength and dulling the mind. Food theft becomes a constant fear. A sailor caught stealing from the stores faces brutal punishment, yet the temptation is great. In the still watches of the night, hungry eyes glance toward the barrels, fingers itching to claim an extra portion. Officers must remain ever vigilant, for the integrity of the ration is vital to the survival of all. Superstitions, too, find fertile ground in hunger's shadow. Some sailors believe that the sea itself demands tribute, that a portion of the stores should be cast into the waves to appease angry spirits. Others whisper that the sick are cursed, their presence bringing misfortune upon the voyage. Such beliefs breed mistrust and division among the crew, eroding the fragile camaraderie forged through hardship. In the face of these trials, the sailors endure. Each meal, no matter how meager, becomes an act of will. They chew the hardtack, sip the sour water, and press on. The hunger never fades, but the body learns to function on less, drawing deep from reserves of grit and determination. As the voyage continues, hope flickers with each sighting of land, each promise of fresh provisions. The longing for fruit, for bread, for cool, clean water grows into a constant ache. Yet the sea offers no mercy, and the sailors know that many more hungry days lie ahead. There are moments when the monotony of the diet weighs as heavily as the hunger itself. Day after day, the same stale hardtack, the same salt-preserved meat, the same sour liquid from the casks. No matter how inventive the cook, there is little that can be done to disguise the sameness. Occasionally, if the ship's course passes through fishing grounds, the sailors will haul in fish, providing a brief respite from their usual fare. A freshly caught fish, grilled over a small fire on the deck, becomes a feast. Spirits lift, conversation brightens, and for a short while, the sea seems a little less vast, a little less unforgiving. Yet such moments are rare. The farther the ship sails from land, the less abundant the fish become. Storms can drive away even these small blessings, and the sea returns to its long, empty rhythm. The sailors' bodies grow lean, their faces gaunt. Clothes hang loose on shrinking frames, and the light of vitality fades from weary eyes. The strength required to climb the rigging or haul heavy lines begins to falter. Every movement becomes an effort, every task a burden. Among the officers and experienced seamen, there is grim awareness of what lies ahead. They have seen scurvy before. They know the signs, though they can do little to prevent it. Conversations among the crew turn quiet when a man begins to show the telltale swelling of the gums or the bruises on the skin. The camaraderie of the ship, so essential to survival, begins to fray under the strain of hunger and illness. As weeks turn to months, the sailors grow more desperate. They scan the horizon endlessly for signs of land, of rescue. Each passing day without relief is marked by the dwindling of rations, the deepening weakness of the body. Some turn to prayer, others to dark superstition. There are whispered tales of ghost ships, of cursed voyages where no man returns. Fear, hunger, and hopelessness intertwine, making the long days seem longer still. Occasionally, the crew will catch rainwater, a rare and precious gift. Sailors will rig tarpaulins or spread cloths on the deck, gathering what they can. The cool, clean water is a balm, bringing a fleeting sense of renewal. But such opportunities are rare, dependent on the whims of the weather. More often, the men must make do with the sour, stagnant water from the barrels below. When landfall finally comes into view, it is greeted with cautious joy. The sailors know that unfamiliar shores bring their own dangers, from hostile inhabitants to treacherous reefs. Yet the promise of fresh food and water outweighs all fears. The ship anchors, and the crew eagerly ventures ashore in search of fruit, vegetables, and clean streams. The first bite of an orange, the first sip of cool water, is a revelation. For some, it comes too late. The ravages of scurvy cannot always be undone, and the sickest may still succumb despite the newfound bounty. After resupplying, the voyage resumes. The fresh provisions are consumed quickly, and soon the sailors return to their familiar rations. The brief interlude of nourishment lingers in memory, a bright spot amid the hardships of life at sea. Yet the hunger returns, persistent and unrelenting. Even for those who survive the ordeal, the scars remain. Teeth lost to scurvy, joints weakened, bodies aged beyond their years. The memory of those long, hungry months at sea will stay with them for a lifetime. And for many, the next voyage will soon begin, bringing with it the same hardships, the same relentless cycle of hunger and survival. As you rest now, let your mind drift with the rhythm of the waves. Picture the endless horizon, the tireless labor of the crew, the quiet courage required to endure such trials. The life of a sailor in the age of exploration was a constant struggle. Each meal a test of will, each day a battle against the slow erosion of the body. And yet they sailed on into the unknown, driven by duty, by hope, or by necessity. Chapter 3. Storms and Shipwrecks. The sea, for all its calm beauty, holds a darker heart. To the sailors of the age of exploration, storms were not merely a hazard. They were a living threat, sudden and merciless. Imagine yourself aboard a ship, the sky a vault of deep blue, the wind gentle in the sails. The sea sparkles with reflected sunlight, and the day passes in a rhythm of familiar work. But on the distant horizon, a line of dark clouds begins to build. The old hands among the crew glance at the gathering sky with wary eyes. The air grows heavy. The wind sharpens with an edge of chill. There is little time to prepare. Orders ring out across the deck. Sailors scramble into the rigging, climbing with practiced speed despite the rising swell beneath their feet. Sails are reefed, lines secured, hatches battened down. The ship groans as it braces for the oncoming fury. The sky darkens to a leaden gray. The first drops of rain spatter the deck, cool and fat. The wind rises, a low moan that builds to a howl. Then the storm strikes in full. Walls of rain lash the sailors, stinging their skin. The wind screams through the rigging, tearing at sails and snapping lines. Waves tower around the ship, black and surging, their crests tipped with foam. The vessel pitches and rolls violently, planks shuddering with each blow. Water crashes over the rails, flooding the deck. Sailors cling to rails, their world reduced to a chaos of wind, water, and darkness. In such moments, survival is not guaranteed. The ship's timbers strain and creak ominously. Every man knows that a single cracked beam, a single torn sail, could spell doom. The pumps must be manned constantly, for water pours into the hold through unseen leaks. The crew, soaked and battered, fights exhaustion as they struggle to keep the ship afloat. The fear of being swept overboard is ever present. A sailor lost to the sea is gone forever, with no hope of rescue. The darkness of the storm swallows all. Even a man crying out would not be heard over the roar of the wind. They tie themselves to the rigging or to the rails when possible, but not all are so fortunate. Beneath the waves, unseen dangers lurk. The keel of the ship may strike submerged rocks or hidden reefs. The charts of the time are crude, their knowledge of the sea incomplete. A storm can drive a vessel far off course into treacherous waters where no safe harbor waits. In the blackness of night, even the most experienced navigator can lose their bearings. Below decks, the sick and injured lie in fear. The hull trembles with each impact. Water sloshes across the floorboards. Crates shift, barrels roll with ominous thuds. The dim lanterns flicker and sometimes fail entirely, plunging the hold into suffocating darkness. The air is thick with the scent of fear and damp wood. Amid the chaos, the captain's voice must remain steady. His orders cut through the storm, a thread of command that holds the crew together. Without leadership, panic could spread. A panicked crew is a doomed crew. Each man plays his part, from the youngest powder monkey to the seasoned bosun. It is a grim ballet of necessity, each movement vital to the survival of the whole. If the ship is fortunate, the storm will pass. The wind will ease, the rain will slacken, and the gray sky will lighten by degrees. The battered vessel will ride lower in the water, her sails torn, her timbers groaning, but still afloat. The crew, bruised and weary, will emerge into the wan light of dawn, counting the missing and tallying the damage. Yet not all ships survive. Many find their end in the heart of the storm. Wreckage strewn across the waves, lives lost without a trace. The sea takes what it will, indifferent to human struggle. For those who live, the memory of the storm lingers. The knowledge that nature's power far exceeds their own is etched deeply into their minds. Even on calm days, the creak of the rigging, the shape of a cloud, can stir that memory. The sailors of the age of exploration face these trials with no weather forecasts, no warning systems. Only the sharp eyes of experienced seamen and the fickle signs of the sky guided them. Their resilience was born of necessity, for to cross the great oceans was to gamble with forces beyond control. In the wake of a storm, the work of recovery begins. The ship bears her wounds openly. Ripped sails hang in tatters, ropes lie frayed and knotted across the deck. The once tidy rows of barrels and crates in the hold have shifted violently, some smashed, their contents spilled into the bilge water. It is a scene of controlled ruin, familiar to all who sail, but no less sobering. The sailors set to work at once, their weariness pushed aside by necessity. There are sails to mend, rigging to splice, water to pump from the flooded hold. Each task must be done with care, for another storm may not be far behind. The sea does not forgive lax repairs. Splintered spars are replaced if spares are aboard, otherwise patched with whatever can be salvaged. The carpenter, an essential figure aboard any ship, works tirelessly to shore up damaged beams and secure the hull. Amidst the labor, there is also grief. Sometimes, after the storm passes, a count is made. and names are whispered in hushed tones. A sailor missing from the watch, last seen on deck when the wind screamed the loudest. Perhaps swept overboard or lost in the hold when a shifting crate struck hard. There are no markers, no graves upon the sea. Only the empty space where a man once worked, laughed, and endured. For those left behind, the rhythm of life resumes. The sea demands it. Watches are kept, sails trimmed, the course set anew. Yet a certain tension lingers, an awareness that at any moment the calm could shatter once more. The older sailors know that surviving one storm is no promise of surviving the next. The dangers of shipwreck were constant companions on these long voyages. In truth, many more ships were lost to wind and wave than to the battles or piracy of popular imagination. The vast stretches of uncharted ocean were littered with hidden hazards. Rocky shoals, shifting sandbars, treacherous reefs, all lay in wait for a vessel pushed off course by a storm. Without accurate charts or the benefit of modern instruments, navigation was as much art as science. A misjudged current, an unseen hazard, and a sturdy ship could be reduced to wreckage within minutes. In those perilous moments when a ship ran aground or foundered, survival depended on fortune and quick thinking. The call to abandon ship might come too late. The lifeboats few and crude. The pounding surf could dash boats to pieces before they cleared the wreck. Many sailors could not swim, for swimming was not a common skill of the age. The thought of being cast into the cold, merciless sea was a terror that haunted even the bravest hearts. When a shipwreck occurred near an unfamiliar coast, fresh dangers awaited. Hostile shores, uncharted territory, uncertain welcome from the inhabitants. Survivors might find themselves marooned for weeks or months, struggling to secure food and shelter. Some made it back to tell their tales, their stories filled with hardship and desperate endurance. Others vanished, their fates unknown. There was a somber tradition among sailors who came upon wreckage at sea. Floating planks, tangled rigging, a lone barrel bobbing in the swells. Such sights were not ignored, but approached with quiet reverence. The sea had claimed her due, and those who sailed upon her knew that they too might one day leave no more than scattered debris upon the waves. Yet, despite the constant threat, voyages continued. The lure of discovery, the promise of fortune, or the demands of duty drove sailors again and again into the deep. Each man knew the risks. Each man had heard the tales of ships lost with all hands, of fleets shattered by tempests. But still they sailed, for such was the way of the age. Now, as you drift into rest, imagine the slow rocking of a ship upon calmer seas, the scent of salt air, the creak of rigging above. For all its fury, the sea could also soothe, her vast expanse a lullaby of endless waves. The sailors, hardened by storm and shipwreck, found in her rhythms a strange comfort. And so they sailed on. Chapter 4. Magellan's Deadly Voyage. It was one of the most ambitious journeys of its time. A voyage into the unknown, driven by the desire to chart new passages and claim new lands. When Ferdinand Magellan set out in 1519 under the flag of Spain, few among his crew could have foreseen the scale of hardship they would face. Imagine yourself now, standing upon the deck of one of his 5 ships, gazing out at a horizon vast and unbroken. The sea stretches endlessly, each new dawn offering only the same rolling expanse of water. The fleet had departed from Seville, well provisioned but burdened by uncertainty. Magellan himself, a Portuguese navigator in Spanish service, was regarded with suspicion by many in his command. Yet his determination was resolute. The goal was clear: to find a westward route to the fabled Spice Islands, a passage long sought by European powers eager to break the Portuguese monopoly over the eastern trade routes. In those early days, spirits among the crew remained high. The promise of adventure, of fame and fortune, buoyed even the most reluctant sailor. But as the weeks turned into months and the familiar coasts of Europe receded behind them, the reality of the voyage began to settle in. The sea could be beautiful, yes, but it was also a place of endless toil and looming dangers. Crossing the Atlantic, the fleet faced long stretches without sight of land. The winds were not always kind and progress slowed. The cramped quarters below deck grew foul with the press of unwashed bodies and the dampness of the sea air. Tempers began to fray. Grumbling among the sailors turned to outright dissent among some of the officers, who resented Magellan's authority and questioned his course. Upon reaching the coast of South America, the fleet encountered vast river deltas and unfamiliar shores. Here, Magellan chose to linger, searching for a passage to the Pacific. The months dragged on. Supplies dwindled. Winter approached cold and wet. In a desolate anchorage known later as Port St. Julian, mutiny flared. A group of captains plotted against Magellan, believing his leadership doomed the voyage. Yet Magellan was a man of steel will. The mutiny was crushed swiftly and decisively. Punishments were severe. One captain was executed, others marooned or imprisoned. Discipline was restored, but at a cost. The fragile unity of the fleet was broken, mistrust lingering among the crew. When at last the strait that would bear his name was found, the relief was tempered by the peril of navigating its narrow, treacherous waters. Sharp turns, hidden shoals, and unpredictable currents tested the skill of every helmsman. One ship deserted, turning back to Spain. The remaining vessels pressed on, emerging at last into the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. It was here that the true ordeal began. The Pacific was unlike any sea the sailors had known. Its name, meaning peaceful, proved a cruel irony. For weeks they sailed without sight of land. The wind held steady, but supplies ran low. The sailors fell into a grim routine. Hardtack infested with worms, water that stank of rot. Rats became a source of meat, hunted in the shadows of the hold. And then scurvy took hold. Gums swelled, teeth loosened, legs swelled and ached. The men weakened visibly, voices rough with thirst and hunger. Bodies grew thin, eyes hollow. Day by day the toll mounted. Those too sick to rise were laid in their hammocks, their fate uncertain. Hope dimmed with each empty horizon. Magellan himself remained steadfast, driving the fleet onward. His journals speak of the crew's suffering, but also of his unshaken resolve. Yet even he could not stave off the inevitable losses. One by one, sailors succumbed to scurvy, hunger, and exhaustion. The vast Pacific seemed without end, its calm surface belying the ordeal it imposed upon those who dared to cross it. After 3 harrowing months at sea, land was sighted at last. The islands of what is now Guam offered a brief respite, a chance to replenish water and gather fresh food. Spirits lifted, but the memory of that endless crossing would haunt the survivors. The fleet pressed on to the Philippines, weary but determined. Here, fresh challenges awaited. Contact with local rulers led to alliances, but also conflict. In a fateful encounter at the island of Mactan, Magellan himself was killed, struck down by warriors defending their shores. His death sent a shock through the fleet. Leadership passed to his remaining captains, who resolved to complete the voyage. With their admiral gone, The sailors faced the daunting task of continuing without the men who had been their guiding force. The fleet, now reduced to 3 battered ships, pressed onward toward the Spice Islands, the original goal that had lured them across so many leagues of perilous sea. The loss of Magellan weighed heavily on every man aboard. His presence, at once feared and respected, had been a steadying influence in the darkest hours. Now uncertainty hung over the voyage like a dense fog. In the weeks that followed, the surviving leaders worked to maintain order and discipline. The men were weakened from their ordeal, their numbers thinned by sickness and battle. Supplies remained scarce. The lure of the Spice Islands became more than a hope for profit. It was a desperate need for survival. Cloves, nutmeg, and other precious goods would not only enrich the expedition, but also serve as leverage for replenishing their stores and securing safe harbor. At last, the fleet reached the Moluccas. There, they negotiated with local rulers, trading what remained of their European goods for the coveted spices. The sailors, haggard and worn, marveled at the abundance of the islands. Here were the riches they had dreamed of, though they arrived at great cost. For a time, the ships were resupplied, the men regaining some strength. Yet the journey was far from over. The long return to Spain loomed ahead, fraught with its own perils. It was decided that one ship, the Victoria, would attempt the westward route around Africa, seeking to complete the first circumnavigation of the globe. The other ships, damaged and undercrewed, faced their own uncertain fates. Aboard the Victoria, Captain Juan Sebastian Elcano assumed command, determined to see the voyage through. The homeward leg proved no kinder than what had come before. Storms battered the Victoria as she crossed the Indian Ocean. Once again, scurvy and hunger stalked the crew. The African coast, treacherous with uncharted shoals and hostile ports, offered little respite. Elcano made the bold decision to avoid the Portuguese strongholds, where capture was a real threat. Instead, they sailed a long, arduous course westward, driven by fading hope and sheer determination. As the ship rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the crew was a shadow of its former self. Only 18 sailors remained fit enough to stand watch. Their clothing hung in tatters, skin darkened by sun and salt, faces hollowed by hardship. The Victoria creaked and groaned beneath them, her timbers strained by the long voyage. Yet the Atlantic lay before them at last, familiar waters that stirred memories of home. Each passing day brought them closer to Spain, though the voyage's toll weighed heavily upon all. When the Victoria finally limped into Sanlúcar de Barrameda in September 1522, nearly 3 years after her departure, she carried only a fraction of the original crew. 18 men staggered ashore, the first sailors in history to circumnavigate the globe. Their return was met with astonishment and awe. The tale of their journey, of unimaginable hardships and distant lands, spread quickly through Europe. The spices they carried, though meager, proved the value of the venture. Yet for those who survived, the experience left deep scars. Many would never sail again, their bodies broken, their minds haunted by the endless sea and the countless comrades lost. Magellan's deadly voyage stands as a testament to human endurance and ambition, a journey that forever changed the world's understanding of its own vastness. Yet it also laid bare the true cost of such exploration. The bravery of those sailors, their suffering and sacrifice, echo through history as a reminder of what was endured in the pursuit of discovery. Now, as you rest and drift towards sleep, picture the lone Victoria sailing across the endless ocean, her sails patched and worn, her crew hollow-eyed but resolute. The sea, ever vast and indifferent, cradles her in its slow, unending rhythm. The age of exploration was a time of wonder, yes, but also of hardship beyond imagining. And still they sailed on. Chapter 5. the mutiny on the Batavia in the early 17th century. The Dutch East India Company ruled vast trade routes across the oceans, its ships carrying spices, silks, and treasure from distant lands. Among these was the Batavia, a splendid new vessel bound for the Dutch colony of Java. It set sail from the Netherlands in 1628. Its decks crowded with passengers, sailors, and merchants. Imagine yourself aboard, the air crisp with the promise of adventure. The Batavia was no mere cargo ship, but a floating microcosm of society, its passengers drawn from every corner of Europe. The voyage began with high spirits. The Batavia was a fine ship, fast and strong, and her captain, Francisco Pelser, was a man of reputation. Yet beneath the polished surface, tension simmered. The ship's commander of soldiers, Geronimus Cornelis, a disgraced apothecary fleeing scandal, nursed dark ambitions. His resentment of authority and persuasive manner soon drew a circle of malcontents to his cause. Life aboard ship was arduous. The journey to Java could take many months, fraught with storms, disease, and uncertainty. The cramped quarters bred discomfort and resentment. Passengers and crew alike struggled with the monotony of shipboard life, the endless expanse of sea broken only by brief glimpses of distant shores. Cornelis, charismatic and cunning, began to sow discontent. He whispered of rebellion, of seizing the ship and its riches, of forging a new life free from the yoke of the company. Among the disaffected sailors and soldiers, his vision found fertile ground. The plan was daring, reckless even, but the lure of freedom and gold was powerful. Before the mutiny could be launched, fate intervened. In June 1629, as the Batavia sailed through the treacherous waters of the Houtman Abrolhos, off the western coast of Australia, disaster struck. In the dark of night, the ship ran aground on a submerged reef. The impact was sudden and catastrophic. The hull split, timbers shuddering as water rushed in. Panic swept the decks as passengers and crew scrambled for safety. In the chaos, Captain Pelser and a small group of officers managed to launch the ship's longboat. Seeking help from the distant colony, they left behind over 200 survivors stranded on the barren reef and nearby islands, with dwindling supplies and no certainty of rescue. The stage was set for a descent into terror. With the captain gone, Cornelis seized his chance. He and his followers quickly took control, using the promise of order and the threat of violence to dominate the desperate castaways. What followed was a reign of cruelty that has echoed through history. Cornelis, determined to secure power and eliminate rivals, began a systematic campaign of murder. Men, women, and children alike fell victim to his ruthless ambitions. The survivors endured unimaginable hardship. Food and water were scarce. The sun beat mercilessly upon the exposed reef, while the sea offered little relief. Each day brought fresh horror as Cornelis's men carried out their grim orders. Fear and despair gripped the survivors, their hopes pinned on the faint possibility of rescue. Meanwhile, Captain Pelser faced his own ordeal, navigating the perilous waters to reach Batavia and summon aid. His return was far from certain, the distance vast and fraught with danger. For those left behind, each passing day tested their endurance to the limit. In this bleak and isolated place, humanity was stripped bare. Acts of kindness and courage stood in stark contrast to the brutality that unfolded. Small groups of survivors resisted where they could, clinging to hope amid the darkness. Amid the growing horror on the reef, a fragile glimmer of resistance began to take form. Among those stranded was a group of soldiers under the leadership of Weeby Hayes, a young man of quiet determination. Unlike Cornelis and his followers, Hayes remained loyal to the captain and the company. Seeing the unfolding violence, he gathered a small band and moved to a distant island. vowing to protect those who could escape the mutineers' grasp. This island became a place of refuge, though life there was harsh. The land was barren, with little to sustain them. Yet through ingenuity and cooperation, Hayes and his men found ways to survive. They constructed simple shelters from driftwood and scavenged wreckage, caught fish from the surrounding shallows, and collected precious rainwater in makeshift containers. Though their resources were meager, their spirit remained unbroken. From across the water, they could see the smoke of fires on the reef, hear the distant cries that told of further bloodshed. Cornelis, aware of their defiance, dispatched armed bands to destroy the outpost. What followed was a series of brutal skirmishes, fought with makeshift weapons among the rocks and sand. Hayes and his men, driven by desperation and the will to protect the innocent, fought fiercely. Time and again, they repelled the attackers, their island sanctuary holding against all odds. Throughout this ordeal, hope clung to the slender thread of rescue. In distant Batavia, Captain Calcert had succeeded in his perilous mission. Gathering a relief force, he set sail once more for the reef. Yet weeks passed before sails were sighted on the horizon. For the survivors, each day was a test of endurance, every moment shadowed by the threat of death. At last, rescue came. Calcert's return marked the end of Cornelis's tyranny. The surviving mutineers were swiftly captured, their reign of terror brought to an abrupt close. Justice, in the harsh form of 17th century maritime law, was meted out. Trials were held upon the sands of the reef itself. Many of the ringleaders were executed, their bodies left as grim warnings to others who might one day dream of mutiny. For the innocent survivors, the ordeal was over, though its scars would linger. They had endured shipwreck, starvation, and unspeakable cruelty. Yet through courage and resilience, some had lived to tell the tale. The Batavia herself was lost to the sea, her broken timbers claimed by the waves. But her story would endure, passed down through generations as a cautionary tale of ambition unbound by morality. As you settle now into quiet rest, imagine the calm that followed the storm. The reef lies silent beneath the stars, the sea lapping gently at the shore. The survivors, weary but alive, gaze into the night, grateful for the simple gift of life itself. The age of exploration was not only a time of discovery, but of the darkest trials of the human spirit. And still, through courage and endurance, they endured. Chapter 6. The Perils of Navigation. In an age long before satellites or electronic charts, navigation across the vast oceans was an art fraught with uncertainty. Imagine yourself standing beside the ship's navigator, the wind tugging at your clothes as the deck shifts gently beneath your feet. Before him, no glowing screen, no precise map, only the tools of his trade. A simple compass, a heavy logbook, perhaps a sextant or astrolabe gleaming in the morning sun. The navigator's world was one of guesswork and skill, honed through long experience and no small measure of luck. Each voyage began with the best information available, hand-drawn maps, sailors' tales, and the wisdom of those who had braved the waters before. Yet these charts were often incomplete, riddled with unknowns and dotted with warnings. Here be dragons, some edges declared, though the real dangers were reefs, currents, and the ever-shifting winds. Much of the world's oceans remained uncharted, their perils known only to those who had survived them. The navigator's primary ally was the sky. By day, the sun marked the ship's passage across the heavens. At dawn and dusk, its rising and setting offered clues to latitude. At night, the stars became the sailor's guide. The North Star in the northern hemisphere, or the Southern Cross further south, helped to maintain a rough sense of direction. Yet clouds could obscure the heavens for days at a time. Storms could toss the ship wildly off course. And without clear skies, Even the most skilled navigator was left to drift in uncertainty. Dead reckoning, the practice of estimating one's position based on speed, time, and heading, was a constant companion to celestial navigation. A sailor might throw a weighted log attached to a line into the water, counting the knots that passed through his fingers to gauge speed. Combined with the hourglass and a careful logbook, this method allowed for a rough estimate of distance traveled. Yet, small errors compounded over time. A miscalculation here, an unnoticed current there, and a ship could find itself hundreds of miles from its intended course. Currents themselves were a source of endless frustration. Invisible rivers within the sea, they could pull a vessel east or west without the crew's knowledge. In some regions, such as the treacherous Agulhas current off the southern tip of Africa, these flows could be powerful enough to capsize a ship or drive it onto unseen rocks. The navigator had no way to measure these forces directly, relying instead on observation and intuition. It was a constant battle between human skill and the vast unseen forces of the ocean. Magnetic variation further complicated the task. The ship's compass, a fragile and imperfect instrument, was subject to the shifting influence of the Earth's magnetic field. In some regions, it pointed true. In others, it veered wildly. Worse still, the iron nails and fittings of the ship itself could interfere with the reading. A compass that could be trusted one day might deceive the next, leading the navigator into peril. Time, too, was an enemy. Without accurate timepieces, determining longitude was nearly impossible. Sailors could measure latitude with reasonable accuracy, but knowing how far east or west they had traveled remained guesswork. The invention of the marine chronometer lay in the future. Until then, each voyage across wide oceans was a leap of faith. Navigators could plot a rough course, but certainty was a luxury they did not possess. The consequences of error were grave. A ship off course might find itself stranded without fresh water or food, far from known trade routes. It might wander into hostile waters or run aground on an uncharted reef. The sailors aboard knew this well. Each day of uncertain navigation carried with it a shadow of fear. They relied on the navigator's skill and on the grace of the sea to guide them safely onward. For the ordinary sailors, the mysteries of navigation were both awe-inspiring and opaque. The navigator, hunched over his charts and instruments, was a figure of respect, his calculations shaping the fate of all aboard. Yet even he could not banish the doubts that crept in during long sunless stretches of the voyage. The sea was vast, and the stars, though constant, offered no mercy. When visibility failed, as it often did in stormy weather or in fog-laden regions, the navigator's burden grew heavier still. With no stars to guide them and the sea cloaked in mist, the crew pressed on blindly, trusting to their instruments and their experience. It was in such times that the risks of error multiplied. The logline might slip, the hourglass might be misjudged, and the subtle pull of an unseen current could carry the vessel far from its intended track. Days could pass in this blind drift, each hour deepening the uncertainty of their position. In these stretches of uneasy progress, tension gripped the ship. Officers cast frequent glances toward the navigator, whose brow grew ever more furrowed as the days wore on. The sailors themselves felt the unease, though few understood the intricacies of navigation. A murmur of worry would pass through the lower decks if the sun remained hidden for too long. If no landfall appeared when expected, hope and anxiety mingled in equal measure, each dawn bringing either reassurance or fresh doubt. Sometimes, a single sighting could change everything. The sudden appearance of an unfamiliar island on the horizon might confirm a long-suspected error or reveal a new hazard altogether. There are tales of ships stumbling upon unknown archipelagos, their charts hastily amended with new names and crude sketches. For the sailors, such moments were both thrilling and perilous, for unknown lands meant the potential for a resupply, but also the risk of hostility or shipwreck. Equally feared were the so-called false landfalls. In certain conditions, optical illusions could trick even the most seasoned eyes. Clouds on the horizon might appear as distant mountains, leading the crew to alter course in vain pursuit of land that was not there. These mirages, born of hope and fatigue, could lure a ship into danger or waste precious days on a fruitless detour. Compounding these challenges was the unreliability of the charts themselves. The maps of the age of exploration were a patchwork of old knowledge and new discoveries, riddled with inaccuracies and speculative guesses. Entire coastlines might be misplaced by hundreds of miles. Phantom islands, recorded by earlier voyagers in error, still haunted many maps, leading some ships to search in vain for lands that existed only in the minds of cartographers. Even when following a known trade route, danger was ever present. Shallow reefs lay in wait beneath seemingly safe waters, and sudden storms could drive a ship onto hidden shores. The navigator bore this weight constantly, knowing that a single misjudgment could doom the voyage. Every day at sea was a test of endurance, both physical and mental. In the rare moments when land was sighted as expected, when the ship's position matched the navigator's predictions, a wave of relief would sweep through the crew. Cheers would rise from the deck, and the navigator would allow himself a small smile. Yet the satisfaction was fleeting. The next leg of the journey always awaited, another stretch of open water to be crossed, another dance with uncertainty to be undertaken. For the ordinary sailors, the mysteries of navigation remained a source of both awe and resignation. They worked their duties with grim determination, trusting that the navigator's skill would carry them safely onward. Yet each man knew, deep in his bones, that the sea was vast and unforgiving, and that no amount of knowledge could tame its endless expanse. As you rest now, picture the quiet moments between watches, the steady creak of timbers and the gentle lap of waves against the hull. High above, the stars wheel slowly across the sky, ancient guides for those who dare to cross the open sea. The navigator, alone with his charts and instruments, marks their passage through the darkness, ever watchful, ever uncertain, steering a fragile wooden world through the vast unknown. Chapter 7. The Mystery of the Mary Celeste. There are many tales from the age of sail that linger in the imagination. Stories of bravery, endurance, and discovery. Yet among these, few hold such haunting allure as the enigma of the Mary Celeste. Picture the scene, a crisp December morning in 1872, with the brigantine de Gradia cutting through the cold waters of the Atlantic. Ahead, a lone ship drifts with sails partially set, her course erratic, her deck eerily still. The crew of the De Gratia draws closer, curiosity mingled with caution. Through their spyglasses, they see no movement aboard. No figures pacing the deck, no voices calling out across the waves. The Mary Celeste appears deserted. After hailing her and receiving no reply, a boarding party is dispatched. Climbing over the rail, the sailors find themselves in a place suspended in time. The ship is seaworthy. Her cargo of industrial alcohol remains intact. The stores of food and water are sufficient, the galley neat and orderly. In the captain's cabin, charts and personal belongings lie undisturbed. Yet of the crew, not a soul remains. 10 people had been aboard. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their young daughter Sophia, and 7 crewmen. All are gone, vanished without trace. The boarding party searches every corner of the ship. There are no signs of violence, no evidence of struggle. The lifeboat is missing, suggesting the crew may have abandoned ship. But why? The vessel shows no damage that would warrant such an action. The hull is sound. The cargo is secure. Even the logbook, its last entry dated 10 days earlier, records nothing amiss. The weather had been fair. The ship had been well within her course from New York to Genoa. Speculation runs wild. Pirates? Unlikely, for nothing of value has been taken. Mutiny? There is no sign of disorder. A sudden wave or seaquake? Possible, yet the ship bears no scars of such an event. Poison from the cargo vapors? But why would seasoned sailors abandon a sturdy ship into the uncertain expanse of the sea? The day gracious captain makes the fateful decision to salvage the Mary Celeste, sailing her to Gibraltar for investigation. There, a tribunal is convened. Maritime law demands inquiry into any abandoned ship. The proceedings are thorough, probing every possible cause. Suspicion falls on everyone from the crew of the Dei Gratia to insurance fraud by the ship's owners. Yet no evidence supports these claims. Witnesses describe the state of the ship. The sails, some set and some furled, show signs of rough handling but not desperation. The ship's single pump is partly disassembled, perhaps indicating a problem with water ingress, though the hold is dry. A sword found beneath the captain's bed bears faint stains, tested and dismissed as rust. No definitive answers emerge. In the absence of fact, imagination fills the void. Newspaper accounts, eager for sensation, spin tales of sea monsters, ghostly apparitions, or supernatural forces. The public becomes enthralled. The Mary Celeste enters the lore of the sea, a mystery unsolved and enduring. For sailors of the time, the story resonates deeply. To vanish without trace. Leaving behind an intact ship is a fate that chills even the most seasoned mariner. The ocean holds many secrets. Ships disappear in storms. Founders claim their victims. But here was a vessel adrift, her life mysteriously erased. The sea, vast and indifferent, offers no answers. In the months and years that followed, the story of the Mary Celeste grew in the telling. Each retelling added new layers of intrigue. Some claimed that the ship had been cursed. Others that it had sailed into an area of strange magnetic forces where compasses spun uselessly. Writers of the time, drawn to the eerie romance of the sea, penned articles and stories that blurred the line between fact and fiction. Yet among sailors, the tale served as a sobering reminder of the ocean's caprice. Here was a ship found floating safely, provisions untouched, its crew vanished. No wreckage, no bodies, no clear cause. It reinforced a truth every seafarer knew well. The sea could take life in countless ways, not all of them understood. An unseen current, a rogue wave, a sudden panic among the crew. Even the sturdiest vessel could become a stage for tragedy. In more practical circles, theories abounded. Some suggested that alcohol vapors from the cargo, leaking from poorly sealed barrels, might have created an explosion or the threat of one. Fearing fire, the captain may have ordered the crew into the lifeboat, tethering it to the ship by a line. If the line had snapped or been cut in rough weather, the lifeboat would drift away, leaving the ship adrift. Others argued that a waterspout, a rare but powerful phenomenon, might have swept the decks, forcing an evacuation. Yet none of these explanations could be proven. The captain of the Mary Celeste, Benjamin Briggs, had been known as a cautious and devout man, unlikely to panic or make rash decisions. His reputation lent further weight to the mystery. What had caused such an experienced sailor to abandon his ship, or allowed something to occur that led to the vanishing of all aboard? The sea held its secrets closely. Over the decades, the ship itself passed through various owners. She sailed under different captains, carrying different cargoes. but her reputation as an ill-fated vessel lingered. Sailors were wary of signing aboard. Some spoke of hearing footsteps on her decks at night, of voices whispering through the timbers. Eventually, the Mary Celeste met a quiet end, wrecked off the coast of Haiti under suspicious circumstances, her remains lost to the tide. Yet her story lived on. Generations of sailors and landsmen alike would retell the mystery, drawn to its unanswered questions. For the sailors of the age of exploration and those who followed, it was a tale that embodied the uncertainty of life at sea. No matter how skilled the navigator, no matter how sturdy the ship, the ocean remained a place of deep mystery. A ship could vanish, a crew could disappear, and no one might ever know why. As you rest now, imagine the Mary Celeste drifting across the calm Atlantic, her sails slack, her decks empty beneath the open sky. The wind whispers through the rigging. The waves lap gently against her hull. Somewhere in the vastness of the sea, her crew was lost to time. And still, she sailed on, a lonely ghost upon the waters. Chapter 8. Superstition at sea. Life at sea in the age of exploration was harsh, uncertain, and often perilous. Faced with the vast unknown, sailors clung to more than just their skills and instruments. They carried with them a rich tapestry of beliefs, superstitions woven into every aspect of their daily life. Imagine yourself aboard such a vessel, the deck creaking softly beneath your feet, the endless horizon stretching all around. Beneath the surface of the sailors' banter and toil lies a deep reverence for the mysteries of the sea. From the moment a voyage began, omens were sought and interpreted. The day of departure mattered greatly. Setting sail on a Friday was considered unlucky, as it was believed to be the day of Christ's crucifixion. If a voyage had to begin on such a day, the crew might grumble and cross themselves, bracing for misfortune. The presence of certain animals could also signal ill luck. Black cats were viewed with suspicion by some, though others believed they brought protection if treated well. Seeing a shark following a ship was a grim sign, thought to herald death aboard. Sailors believed that whistling on deck could summon the wind. In fair weather, it might be done deliberately to call a breeze. But during a storm, it was strictly forbidden, lest it anger the spirits of the air. The same applied to naming the sea aloud or speaking of good fortune too confidently. The ocean, they believed, could hear such boasts and punish arrogance with sudden fury. The ship itself was more than wood and sail. It was a living entity, often referred to in the feminine. Sailors spoke kindly of her, touching the timbers as if to soothe their moods. Before a ship's first voyage, elaborate rituals might be performed to bless her and ensure safe passage. Wine or oil was poured over the bow, offerings made to the deep. To fail in this respect was to invite disaster. Mermaids occupied a curious place in maritime belief. Sightings were not uncommon in sailors' tales, often recounted with a mix of awe and dread. These beings were thought to be omens of doom, luring ships to wreck on hidden rocks or calling men to watery graves. At the same time, they were figures of fascination, their voices said to echo across the waves in the dead of night. Birds, too, held special significance. The appearance of a seabird far from land might signal an approaching storm or the nearness of unseen shores. Albatrosses, in particular, were viewed with reverence. To harm one was to bring a terrible curse upon the ship. The story of the ancient mariner who slew the albatross was well known, a cautionary tale repeated across countless voyages. Even mundane aspects of life were touched by superstition. Certain knots were tied in particular ways to ward off ill luck. Coins were placed beneath the mast during construction to bring prosperity. Tattoos, which became popular among sailors, were often chosen for their protective qualities. A pig and a rooster tattooed on the feet, for example, were thought to help a sailor survive a shipwreck. as these animals were believed to float on the waves. Death at sea was surrounded by ritual and belief. When a sailor passed, his body was sewn into his hammock with the final stitch placed through the nose, ensuring no mistake had been made. A brief ceremony followed, solemn and respectful. The body was committed to the deep, wrapped in canvas, slipping beneath the waves as the crew bowed their heads. The spot was marked, remembered in the ship's log, and often revisited in the sailors' conversations. Beneath these beliefs lay a deep respect for the sea itself. It was seen as a realm of spirits and unknown powers, vast beyond comprehension. No matter how skilled the navigator or how strong the ship, fate remained in the hands of forces unseen. Superstition offered a way to make sense of this uncertainty, to impose some order upon the chaos of wind and wave. These beliefs were not confined to moments of fear or danger. They permeated the daily routines of the sailors, shaping how they approached their work and interacted with one another. The act of naming a new ship, for instance, was surrounded by a ceremony. A poorly chosen name was thought to bring misfortune, and great care was taken to select one that honored the sea or the divine. During the christening, wine or spirits were poured over the bow to appease the ocean and invite favorable winds. Similarly, certain words were avoided altogether while at sea. The word drowned was rarely spoken, as it was believed to tempt fate. Instead, sailors might refer obliquely to those gone to the deep or taken by the sea. Even whistling or idle talk of shipwrecks was frowned upon, for fear it might attract disaster. Such caution reflected the sailors' constant awareness of their vulnerability beneath the open sky. The hierarchy aboard ship also played a role in maintaining these superstitions. Senior sailors, often called old salts, acted as guardians of tradition, passing down knowledge of omens and rituals to younger crew members. New hands were expected to learn these unwritten rules quickly, for to offend the sea through ignorance was a serious matter. These teachings provided a sense of continuity and identity, binding the crew together in a shared understanding of their place in the great expanse of the ocean. Superstition also offered comfort during long voyages. When weeks passed without sight of land, and the monotony of sea life weighed heavily, rituals and small acts of reverence provided a sense of control. A lucky charm, a whispered prayer, or the observance of a long-held custom could ease a sailor's mind, reminding him that he was part of a lineage of mariners who had faced similar trials. Yet these beliefs could also lead to tension. In times of great hardship, when storms battered the ship or sickness spread among the crew, suspicion might turn inward. A sailor perceived as unlucky or thought to have broken a taboo could become a scapegoat. Murmured accusations and furtive glances might isolate a man, deepening the strain on already fragile bonds. Captains and officers had to manage these undercurrents carefully, maintaining discipline while respecting the deep-seated fears of their men. Stories of ghost ships were perhaps the most haunting of all seafaring legends. Vessels seen in the distance, shrouded in mist, with no crew visible on deck, were thought to be harbingers of doom. The most famous of these was the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail the seas eternally. Sightings of such ships were rare, but their tales echoed through every port, growing in the telling. For sailors facing the vast unknown, such legends offered both a warning and a way to grapple with the mysteries of their world. In the quiet hours of the night watch, when the stars hung low and the sea whispered against the hull, these superstitions gained new life. The creak of the timbers, the flicker of a lantern, the sudden call of a seabird all could stir the imagination. Alone with their thoughts, sailors reflected on the unseen forces that guided their fate, the thin line between life and death upon the endless waters. As you rest now, picture the ship beneath a sky of glittering stars, her sails full in the gentle night breeze. Below decks, sailors murmur soft prayers, fingers brushing lucky tokens. Above, the sea stretches into the dark, ancient and unknowable. In this world, superstition was not mere fancy, but a thread that bound each man to his ship, his comrades, and the vast, mysterious ocean that cradled them all.
Chapter 9. Encounters with a New World for Sailors of the Age of Exploration. The sight of new land on the horizon was more than a moment of relief. It was a plunge into the unknown. After weeks, or even months, at sea, the sudden appearance of dark green shorelines stirred a complex mix of hope, anxiety, and awe. Imagine standing at the rail of a wooden ship, your eyes straining to make out the shapes of trees, hills, and distant beaches as the ship draws slowly closer. The air changes, carrying scents, unfamiliar earth, damp vegetation, the sharp tang of salt marshes. These lands, later known to Europeans as the New World, were not new to the people who lived there. Long before the sails of Spanish, Portuguese, English, and Dutch ships appeared on the horizon, these continents had been home to thriving civilizations. From the high empires of the Andes to the fishing communities along North America's coasts, the Americas were deeply inhabited, their peoples connected by trade, tradition, and ancestral memory. But to the sailors who arrived often half-starved and worn from their journey, these places seemed both wondrous and alien. Their first steps ashore were cautious, guided by officers who understood that encounters could be unpredictable. Sometimes they were met with open arms. Curious locals would approach bearing food, water, or offerings. There might be gestures of peace, cautious smiles, or attempts at exchange. The sailors, dazzled by strange plants, bright birds, and unfamiliar languages, often struggled to make sense of what they saw. In other instances, the reception was wary or hostile. Previous encounters with other ships might have sown distrust. Cultural misunderstandings could escalate quickly. A gesture meant as respect might be misinterpreted. A sailor reaching for a gift might be seen as trying to take by force. The fog of language, the burden of fear, and the unequal footing of power made every meeting fraught with uncertainty. Captains usually tried to assert dominance early, planting flags, offering gifts, or reading official proclamations in languages the local inhabitants could not understand. These were often meaningless to those watching, but deeply symbolic to the Europeans, who viewed themselves as emissaries of distant crowns. In their eyes, these actions marked the land as claimed. For the sailors, these rituals brought little change to their daily life. Though they understood the gravity such moments carried, many of these encounters were transactional. Sailors traded metal tools, beads, cloth, and other goods in exchange for food and fresh water. To the newcomers, a handful of local fruits could seem like a banquet after weeks of spoiled rations. These exchanges could be warm and mutually beneficial, yet beneath the surface, a power imbalance was always present. Sailors arrived backed by weapons, by armor, by the authority of empire. They were not just visitors, they were, more often than not, the first wave of something far more permanent. The sailors' journals reflect this tension. Some marveled at the generosity and hospitality they received. Others recorded fear and suspicion, sometimes descending into violence. A misunderstanding over a simple trade might lead to skirmishes. Sailors, unaccustomed to local customs, might accidentally offend their hosts or disregard sacred sites. At times, entire villages would vanish into the forest at the approach of a ship, their people unwilling to risk engagement. For the men aboard these vessels, the New World was a place of contradiction. It offered the allure of gold and glory, the promise of fertile lands and exotic wonders, but it also held disease, resistance, and the psychological weight of confronting cultures entirely outside their experience. Many sailors came ashore thinking themselves superior, yet they quickly learned that their survival often depended on those they had expected to dominate.
As days passed in these new lands, the sailors came to know both the beauty and the hardship that marked the familiar shores. The lush forests teemed with life, yet they also concealed dangers, venomous creatures, unfamiliar diseases, and terrain that confounded the most seasoned explorers. The heat and humidity wore heavily upon men already weakened by long voyages. Simple tasks became exhausting beneath the foreign sun. Even water, so precious aboard ship, could be treacherous when drawn from stagnant pools or unknown streams. Yet, amid these hardships, moments of wonder persisted. Sailors recorded sights of brightly colored parrots wheeling overhead, great rivers winding through endless green, fruits whose taste defied description. The bounty of the land seemed limitless, a stark contrast to the lean provisions of shipboard life. Some men, struck by the beauty of these places, longed to stay ashore, imagining a life beyond the rigors of the sea. Others, wary of unseen threats, yearned for the familiar sway of the deck beneath their feet. Over time, relationships between sailors and the indigenous peoples of the Americas grew more complex. In some regions, alliances were formed, fostered by mutual curiosity or common enemies. Marriages took place, languages were shared, and goods exchanged. Certain sailors, separated from their ships or choosing to remain behind, became part of these local communities, adapting to new ways of life. But these more peaceful exchanges stood in the shadow of a growing reality. Behind the first sailors came settlers, soldiers, missionaries, and merchants, their ambitions vast and often ruthless. The diseases carried unknowingly by Europeans spread ahead of them, devastating populations who had no immunity to such illnesses. Entire villages emptied, not through battle, but through the silent advance of sickness. Sailors, too, suffered in these early encounters. Unfamiliar fevers struck down many who ventured inland. Mosquitoes and other insects brought ailments that drained the strongest among them. Wounds taken in conflict festered in the humid air. The New World, for all its promise, proved a harsh and unforgiving place for those unprepared for its realities. The psychological toll was just as great. The vastness of the land unsettled those accustomed to the narrow confines of a ship. The unfamiliar languages, the different customs, the sheer strangeness of it all weighed upon the mind. Tales of strange rituals, of warriors unseen in the dense forest, of cities hidden in the mountains, circulated among the crew, growing with each retelling. And yet, despite the hardships and the fears, sailors continued to return to these shores. The lure of wealth and discovery, the hope of carving out a place in the chronicles of history, drove them onward. Each voyage added new lines to their maps, new stories to be told in the taverns of distant ports. For those who lived through these encounters, memories of the New World would remain vivid. Some spoke with awe of its splendor, others with bitterness over what they had endured or witnessed. Few were unchanged by the experience. As you rest now, picture a ship lying at anchor in a quiet bay, her sails furled, her crew moving between ship and shore. The jungle breathed softly beyond the beach, the stars above unfamiliar yet bright. It was in places like these that the world of the sailor met the unknown, and where history was forever altered by each fragile encounter. Chapter 10. Dinner at a governor's mansion in the New World, after long weeks at sea. After braving storms, hunger, and the perils of strange shores, few experiences could seem more surreal to a common sailor than stepping into the refined world of colonial governance. Imagine, for a moment, the scene: a grand house perched above a bustling port, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the tropical sun. Palm trees sway gently in the warm breeze. From within, the murmur of voices and the clink of silver drift out through open windows. This is the residence of the colonial governor, the representative of the distant crown. Here, in this strange new world, the rigid hierarchies of Europe are carefully preserved. The governor's mansion is a symbol of power, its furnishings imported from across the sea, its cellars stocked with the best wine the old country can provide. For a sailor granted the rare invitation to dine here, the experience is almost dreamlike. The approach to the house is lined with guards in bright uniforms, muskets gleaming. The sailors, dressed in their best, though their garments may still carry the stains of sea life, are ushered in. The entrance hall is cool and shaded. The floors tiled, the air rich with unfamiliar spices and the faint scent of polished wood. Servants, many drawn from the local population, move quietly through the rooms, their presence a constant reminder of the layered society that has taken root in these colonies. The governor himself is a figure of both fascination and unease. Clad in fine silks, his manner polished, he represents the authority of an empire. To the sailors, he seems a creature of a different world, far removed from the toil and hardship of life at sea. Yet, beneath the surface, there is an understanding. The governor depends on men like these to keep the sea lanes open, to bring news, goods, and reinforcements to this distant outpost. The meal is a lavish affair by any standard. The long table is set with gleaming silver and crisp linen, the plates piled high with dishes both familiar and exotic. There is roast meat, seasoned with local herbs, bowls of tropical fruits whose names the sailors do not know, and fish caught fresh from the nearby waters. There may be bread, baked in European fashion, and cheeses brought from home. The wine flows freely, its rich taste a sharp contrast to the sour beer and stale water of shipboard life. Conversation at the table drifts from tales of the voyage to news from Europe to the challenges of governing such a distant land. The sailors, usually silent in such company, are encouraged to share their experiences. They speak of strange islands, of encounters with native peoples, of battles fought against pirates or rival powers. The governor listens with polite interest, though his eyes often flick to the officers present, gauging the loyalty and usefulness of each man. For the sailors, the experience is both exhilarating and unsettling. The comforts of the mansion, the richness of the food, the civility of the setting, these stand in stark contrast to the grim realities of life at sea. They are reminded of the gulf that separates the ruling classes from those who labor beneath them. Yet for a few hours they are part of this world, their hardships momentarily forgotten in the glow of candles and the warmth of good company. As the evening progresses, the atmosphere within the governor's mansion grows more relaxed. The governor's wife and household join the gathering, their presence softening the formal edges of the meal. Music drifts from the corner of the room, a local musician perhaps, or a sailor skilled with fiddle or flute. The melodies, both foreign and familiar, mingle with the sense of rich sauces and tropical flowers. To the sailors, the strangeness of the moment deepens. Their minds, still tethered to the routines of the ship, struggle to settle in this world of luxury. The softness of a cushioned chair, the delicate stem of a wine glass. The ease of servants appearing and disappearing with practiced grace, all of it feels distant from the hard planks of the deck and the rough-hewn camaraderie of their messmates. Conversations turn to lighter matters. Tales of old voyages are exchanged, the sailors encouraged to share stories of far-flung ports and the oddities encountered there. Some tales draw laughter, others thoughtful silence. There is, beneath it all, an unspoken awareness that this gathering is a meeting of two very different worlds, one bound to the land and its power, the other to the endless uncertainty of the sea. For the governor and his household, the sailors offer a glimpse of the wider empire, a living connection to the distant courts and councils of Europe. For the sailors, the evening offers a rare moment of ease, a brief chance to forget the harsh discipline and daily grind of life aboard ship. As the meal draws to a close, brandy or fortified wine is served. The governor may rise, glass in hand, to offer a toast, perhaps to the king, to the success of the voyage, or to the continued prosperity of the colony. The sailors respond in kind, though the formality of the moment feels strange to them. Their toasts, given in rough but earnest tones, carry the weight of survival rather than ceremony. When the evening ends and the sailors step once more into the humid night, the world of the mansion recedes behind them. The air is heavy with the sense of the tropics, the stars bright above. The soft clink of their boots on the cobble path reminds them that soon they will return to their ship, to the familiar creak of the rigging and the salt stiffened lines beneath their hands. The memory of the dinner lingers, though. In the weeks to come, as the ship sails on to its next destination, the sailors will speak quietly of that evening, the richness of the food, the finery of the table, the strange civility of the governor's world. It will become one more story to share beneath the stars, one more thread in the tapestry of their lives at sea. As you rest now, picture the ship once more, anchored quietly in the harbor, her lanterns gleaming faintly in the darkness. The sea laps gently at her hull, the sounds of distant music fading into the night. The sailors sleep below deck, their bellies full, their minds drifting between the rough certainties of their world and the fleeting elegance of the governor's table. In this brief moment of peace, the hardships of the voyage fade, replaced by dreams of what might yet lie ahead. Chapter 11. The Slave Ships of the Atlantic Among. The most harrowing chapters in maritime history are the voyages of the Atlantic slave ships. For sailors, these journeys were marked by grim duty and moral unease, a stark contrast to the spirit of adventure often celebrated in tales of exploration. Imagine standing on the deck of such a vessel, the air thick with heat and tension. Below, in the cramped, airless hold, hundreds of human beings are confined, taken by force from their homelands and bound for distant markets. The trade in enslaved Africans was a vast and brutal enterprise, spanning centuries and fueling the economies of European empires. Ships specially fitted for this trade sailed from ports in England, Portugal, the Netherlands, and elsewhere, bound first for the coast of West Africa. There, in fortified outposts or through coastal traders, captains acquired their human cargo. The transactions were coldly calculated, with lives measured in commodities, guns, cloth, metal goods exchanged for men, women, and children. For the sailors, the African coast was a place of both dread and opportunity. The climate was punishing, the threat of disease constant. Many fell victim to malaria or yellow fever long before the ship weighed anchor for the dreaded Middle Passage. Yet the wages for these voyages were often higher, tempting men desperate for work or fortune. Some believed the risks worth the reward. Others had little choice. Once the human cargo was taken aboard, the true ordeal began. The enslaved were chained below decks, packed tightly into rows with barely space to move. The holds were dark, stifling, and rank with the odor of sweat, waste, and fear. The sailors were tasked with maintaining order, distributing meager rations, and attempting to keep disease from sweeping through the ship. The work was grim and often brutal. Rebellion was a constant fear, and many crews lived in a state of high tension, armed and watchful. The conditions aboard were beyond grim. Disease spread quickly in the close quarters. Dysentery, smallpox, and other illnesses claimed many lives long before the ship reached its destination. The dead were cast overboard, their loss recorded as little more than a line in the logbook. The sailors themselves fared little better. The same diseases stalked them, and the moral weight of their duties eroded spirit and camaraderie. Some sailors turned to drink, others to cruelty, seeking to numb themselves to the horrors around them. Yet among the crew were also those who recoiled from their orders, performing their tasks with grim necessity and silent shame. The code of the ship allowed little room for protest. Disobedience could mean imprisonment, or, in this brutal world, conscience offered scant protection. Above deck, the ship sailed steadily westward, driven by the trade winds. The sailors climbed the rigging, trimmed the sails, performed their duties with mechanical precision. Yet beneath their feet, the suffering of the enslaved was a constant presence, a weight that seeped into every part of shipboard life. The cries of the sick and dying, the clink of chains, the muttered prayers in unfamiliar tongues all haunted the ears of those above. As the ship pushed further into the Atlantic, the crew settled into a grim routine. Each morning, the enslaved were brought on deck in small groups, their limbs stiff from confinement. The sailors would force them to exercise, making them shuffle or dance to keep their muscles from wasting completely. Drums might be beaten to set the rhythm, the sound a jarring contrast to the misery it was meant to stave off. Afterward, the captives were returned below, the hatch closed once more, shutting them into the stifling dark. Feeding was another grim task. Gruel or beans, doled out in small portions, offered just enough sustenance to keep the captives alive. Water was strictly rationed, and under the relentless heat of the tropics, thirst gnawed constantly at both enslaved and crew. The sailors assigned to this duty often did so with averted eyes, aware that they were caught in a system of cruelty from which there was no easy escape. At night, when the ship fell into uneasy silence, the tension remained. The sailors slept lightly, weapons close at hand. Rebellion was never far from their thoughts. Many ships carried extra restraints and shackles, as well as nets rigged to prevent escape. Still, there were uprisings, desperate and bloody affairs that often ended with heavy loss of life on both sides. The fear of such events haunted every voyage, a shadow that no amount of vigilance could entirely dispel. Storms presented their own dangers. When seas grew rough, the hatches had to be secured to prevent water from flooding below, cutting off the little air that filtered down to the hold. In such times, death came swiftly, and entire groups might be lost before the storm had passed. The sailors, themselves struggling to keep the ship afloat, could do little but listen to the muffled cries beneath the deck. For the sailors, these voyages exacted a terrible toll. The physical hardship was immense, but the psychological burden was greater still. Many returned home changed, their minds scarred by what they had witnessed and done. Some left the sea altogether, unable to reconcile their experiences. Others hardened, burying their guilt beneath layers of indifference or cruelty. Few emerged untouched. As the ship neared its destination, typically the ports of the Caribbean or the American, colonies' preparations began to present the captives for sale. The sailors would be ordered to scrub the decks, freshen the ship's appearance, and clean the enslaved as best they could. Oil might be rubbed into their skin to conceal the ravages of the voyage. It was a final indignity in a long chain of suffering. When the ship docked, the crew might be granted brief shore leave, though many chose to spend it in drink, trying to forget the horrors of the passage. Their pay, often delayed, was meager compensation for the months of hardship and guilt. The ship would soon be ready for a return voyage, laden now with goods purchased with human lives, sugar, tobacco, cotton, or rum. Another leg of the triangle trade complete. For those sailors, the memory of the slave ship lingered long after the voyage was done. The smell of the hold, the sound of chains, the hollow eyes of the captives, these images returned in dreams. In the silent watches of future voyages and in the years that followed, it was a stain that no amount of salt air could wash away. As you rest now, imagine the ship sailing quietly beneath a heavy sky, her sails full, her course steady. The ocean rolls beneath her, vast and unfeeling, bearing witness to the sorrows and burdens of those who crossed its depths. The sailors above, the captives below each bound together in a tragic passage, their lives forever shaped by the dark tide of the Atlantic trade. Chapter 12. The sailors' superstitions about death among sailors. Few subjects were approached with as much caution and reverence as death. To live a life at sea was to exist in close company with peril. Storms, disease, accidents, and conflict could claim a man at any moment, and the vastness of the ocean ensured that most deaths were witnessed only by one's shipmates. The sailors of the age of exploration carried with them a web of beliefs and customs meant to guide them through this ever-present reality. Picture yourself aboard a ship far from land, the sky pale with dawn. The crew moves quietly through their morning tasks, but beneath their words and actions lies a common understanding. To speak openly of death is to invite its presence. Sailors often avoided mentioning it directly, using euphemisms such as gone to the deep or crossed the bar. They believed that to name it aloud was to draw its eye. When a sailor did die, the ship's company observed a solemn ritual. His body was sewn into his hammock, with a weight placed at the feet to ensure a swift descent to the depths. The final stitch was passed through the nose, a grim precaution to confirm that life was truly gone. This practice, though unsettling to modern sensibilities, was an accepted part of life aboard ship. The burial itself was conducted with quiet formality. The crew gathered on deck, the body laid across a plank at the rail. If a chaplain was aboard, he would read a short service. If not, an officer or senior sailor would perform the duty. The words were simple and respectful, a final farewell before the body was committed to the sea. The plank was tilted and the wrapped form slipped silently beneath the waves. For those left behind, the loss was felt keenly. A ship was a small world, its crew bound by shared hardship and routine. The absence of a familiar face, the empty hammock below decks, served as constant reminders of mortality. Superstitions regarding the dead were strong. It was believed that the sea might refuse a burial if proper respect was not shown, or that a restless spirit might return to haunt the ship. Certain omens were particularly feared. The sudden appearance of birds far from land, especially seabirds circling the ship, was often taken as a sign of impending death. A sudden stillness in the air, an unexpected change in the wind, or an unexplainable chill were also viewed with suspicion. Sailors would whisper such things among themselves, careful not to draw attention from the officers. More practical fears accompanied these beliefs. Disease spreading through the close quarters of a ship could claim many lives in short order. Fever, scurvy, and infection were relentless foes. When a ship lost several men in succession, the survivors might grow uneasy, believing the vessel cursed or that an unseen force had been offended. In such times, extra care was taken to observe the small rituals that gave comfort, polishing the ship's bell, tending to the figurehead, offering quiet prayers. Yet amid the fear, there was also resilience. Sailors learned to face death with a certain grim humor, a hard-earned acceptance of their precarious life. They sang songs of lost shipmates, told stories of encounters with spirits, and toasted the memory of those gone. In this way, they honored their dead while reinforcing the bonds of those who remained. As voyages wore on, and the weeks at sea stretched into months, the sailor's relationship with death grew ever more layered. The vast ocean seemed both cradle and grave, a force indifferent to human striving. Many sailors believed that those who perished at sea became part of it in some unseen way. Whispers told of ghost ships glimpsed in the mists, crewed by the souls of the drowned, forever sailing without port. These tales were shared in hushed tones during the quiet of the night watch, when the mind wandered easily under the stars. One of the most enduring beliefs was that the sea remembered disrespect. A sailor who mistreated the ship, disrespected the dead, or defied long-held traditions might bring misfortune upon all. This belief fostered a deep respect for certain rituals. Before long voyages, libations were often poured over the bow as an offering. If a sailor was lost overboard without proper ceremony, it was thought that the sea would remain restless until the debt was paid. Personal tokens were common among the crew. Charms, lockets, or bits of cloth from loved ones were carried close, small shields against fate. Many sailors had tattoos with symbolic meaning: anchors for stability, crosses for protection, stars to guide them home. These marks were more than decoration. They were worn with intention, silent prayers inked into skin. Among officers and navigators, more formal customs held sway. The ship's log meticulously recorded every death, noting the date, cause if known, and circumstances of burial. This record served both legal and spiritual purposes, acknowledging the life lost and ensuring that the dead were not forgotten by the world beyond the sea. When nearing land after a voyage marked by loss, some captains would order a moment of reflection before entering harbor. The crew would gather on deck to honor the memory of their fallen shipmates, offering a final salute. In this way, the boundary between life aboard ship and the world ashore was bridged with dignity. At sea, dreams of lost comrades were common. Sailors often spoke of feeling the presence of a shipmate long after their passing, especially on quiet nights when the wind was soft and the stars bright. Such experiences were shared without ridicule. In the close-knit world of a ship, the bonds between men were deep, forged through shared toil and danger. To feel a lingering connection was viewed not as folly, but as a natural part of life at sea. There are also tales of sailors who courted death too closely. The foolhardy who mocked the sea or defied long-standing superstitions were often regarded with suspicion. If misfortune followed, these men might find themselves ostracized, the crew unwilling to share a watch or meal with them. In such an environment, respect for tradition was not merely encouraged, it was expected. For those who returned from such voyages, the experience of death at sea left an indelible mark. Ashore, they might find the bustling cities and crowded taverns disorienting after the solemn rhythms of the ship. And brave comrades were told again, keeping alive the memory of those claimed by the deep. As you rest now, picture the ship gliding silently beneath the stars, her sails full and steady. Below deck, the crew sleeps, their dreams touched by the vastness of the sea and the lives shared upon it. Death, ever present, is met with respect, ritual, and remembrance, woven into the very fabric of life at sea. In this endless world of water and sky, such traditions are both a comfort and a guide, helping sailors to face each new day with courage and resolve. Chapter 30. Pressed into service. Life as an impressed sailor. For many sailors in the age of exploration and the centuries that followed, life at sea was not chosen, but forced upon them. Picture yourself walking along the bustling docks of London or Liverpool, a merchant in one hand, a tankard in the other, when a heavy hand falls upon your shoulder. Before you can cry out, you are seized, bundled aboard a ship and bound for service. This was impressment, a harsh practice used by naval powers to man their ships, especially in times of war. Impressment, sometimes called the press gang, was a common method of recruitment in Britain's Royal Navy and elsewhere. With the need for experienced sailors ever growing, especially during prolonged conflicts, governments authorized officers to take able-bodied men by force. Press gangs roamed port cities, targeting taverns, inns, and waterfronts. Sailors on leave were easy prey, as were landsmen who happened to resemble seamen in build or dress. For the men seized, life changed in an instant. Few were given time to send word to family or settle affairs. Many awoke days later aboard ship, out to sea with no prospect of escape. The clothing they wore might be their only possessions, their former lives left behind on the cobbled streets of home. Once aboard, the impressed sailor faced the hard reality of naval life. Discipline was strict, often brutal. Orders were given by officers with little tolerance for dissent. Flogging with the Cato nine tails was a common punishment for insubordination. Drunkenness or attempted desertion. The sailor's day began before dawn, filled with labor both dangerous and exhausting. Hauling lines, trimming sails, standing watch, and scrubbing decks were just the beginning. Repairs to rigging, caulking the hull, and manning the ship's guns in times of battle filled every hour. For those unfamiliar with the sea, the adjustment was severe. Seasickness, fatigue, and injury were constant companions. The ship itself could be an alien world. No privacy, little comfort, and constant noise. The rolling of the deck beneath one's feet, the smell of tar and salt, the ever-present dampness, all became part of life. Impressed sailors were not treated equally. Veterans of the sea, those with valuable skills in navigation, carpentry, or sailmaking, often earned a grudging respect. Landsmen, viewed as green and inexperienced, were given the roughest tasks and little consideration. They were expected to learn quickly or suffer the consequences. Food aboard ship was poor at best. Hardtack biscuits, salted meat, and weak beer were the staples. Scurvy remained a threat on longer voyages, its symptoms terrifying to those unfamiliar with the disease. Water grew foul with time, and pests such as rats and cockroaches were a constant nuisance. Worse still was the length of service. Many impressed men remained at sea for years, with no guarantee of release even after hostilities ended. The promise of pay was little comfort, as wages were often delayed, stolen, or spent long before the sailor saw land again. Attempts to desert were met with harsh reprisals, yet many risked it, slipping away in foreign ports or under cover of night. Despite these hardships, life aboard had moments of camaraderie. The sailors, bound by shared suffering, formed close-knit groups. They sang together, told stories, and offered small comforts to one another. Over time, even impressed sailors could earn a place among the crew, their skills and resilience winning them a measure of acceptance. As months passed at sea, the life of an impressed sailor became a strange mix of routine and uncertainty. Each dawn brought the same duties, the same voices calling orders from the quarterdeck. Yet beneath the rhythm of daily work, the hope of freedom lingered. Rumors swept through the ship whenever news from home arrived. Rumors of treaties signed, wars ending, fleets returning to port. For many, these whispers were a lifeline, a reason to endure another day. The passage of time aboard ship could be both swift and cruel. seasons blurred, birthdays were forgotten. Friendships deepened through hardship, but grief came often. A fall from the rigging, an accident with heavy tackle, or the slow decline of disease claimed many lives. When a shipmate was lost, the ritual of burial at sea reminded all of the fragility of life upon the waves. During lulls in duty, sailors found ways to occupy themselves. Some carved intricate designs into bone or wood, creating tokens to trade or send home. Others played games of dice or told tall tales of past voyages and distant lands. Music was prized. Fiddles, pipes, and drums echoed through the lower decks, lifting spirits if only for a short while. For impressed sailors, letters from home were rare treasures. To hear news of loved ones, of children grown or sweethearts waiting, was both joy and sorrow. Many could neither read nor write, relying on shipmates to pen messages or interpret the few letters that reached them. The longing for home never fully faded. In moments of quiet, a sailor might stand at the rail, gazing across the endless sea, wondering when or if he would see familiar shores again. The end of a voyage brought no guarantees. Some impressed sailors were released once peace was declared or their ship returned to home port. Others were transferred to new vessels, their service extended by the needs of the fleet. Protests were often ignored. The Admiralty's power was vast, and the voice of a single sailor held little sway against it. Those who did regain their freedom carried the marks of their time at sea. The roll of the deck lingered in their step. The calluses of rope work hardened their hands. Stories of distant battles, fierce storms, and strange lands filled their speech. Yet for many, the experience left deeper scars, bitterness at the life stolen from them, memories of brutality, and the knowledge of comrades left behind. In later years, when the practice of impressment finally faded, it remained a bitter chapter in maritime history. Sailors who had once been seized in taverns or dragged from city streets never forgot. Their tales passed down through generations, warned of the dangers of the press gang and the harsh life aboard the warships of empire. As you rest now, picture a great wooden ship at anchor, her sails furled, her crew gathered on deck beneath a starlit sky. Among them stand men taken from home against their will, bound together by hardship and the sea. The waves lap gently against the hull. The wind stirs the rigging. And in the stillness of the night, hope flickers quietly in their hearts. Chapter 14. The long voyage home for sailors who had endured months or even years at sea. The prospect of returning home brought a mixture of joy, weariness, and uncertainty. Imagine standing upon the deck as the ship's bow turns toward familiar waters. The air feels different. The stars seem brighter. Word passes quietly among the crew. The long voyage home has begun. Yet the journey itself was far from simple. Ships returning from the New World, the Indies, or distant colonial ports often faced the most dangerous part of their passage on the homeward leg. The vessel was likely battered, her timbers swollen and strained from months at sea. Her sails, patched many times, could barely catch the wind. The crew, thinned by sickness and hard labor, worked with what strength they had left. Officers knew well that a single bad storm could undo all they had endured. Navigation became even more critical. The desire to make good time was tempered by caution. Shoals, uncharted reefs, and treacherous coastlines lay between the ship and her port. The North Atlantic, in particular, could be merciless. Fierce gales, towering waves, and icy winds challenged even the most seasoned sailors. Weeks of careful steering, constant repairs, and endless watches were still required to reach the safety of home. Life aboard settled into a weary rhythm. The sailors, their bodies lean and scarred, moved through their duties with a quiet determination. Food supplies were often low, water rationed. The prospect of landfall became a beacon in their thoughts, a dream to sustain them through the final miles. At night, conversations turned often to home wives and sweethearts waiting. Children grown older, streets remembered fondly or with longing. Yet homecoming brought its own anxieties. Many sailors had been gone so long that they wondered what awaited them. Letters sent months or years earlier might never have arrived. News from home was scarce. Would loved ones still wait upon their return? Would debts or disputes cloud their welcome? These questions haunted many as the ship crept closer to port. As the coastline came into view, faint outlines of cliffs, the distant glimmer of harbor lights, a surge of emotion swept the crew. Cheers might rise from the deck, rough voices breaking into song. The familiar sense of land reached their nostrils, mingling with the salt of the sea. For some, tears came unbidden. The sight of home after so long at sea was a moment of profound relief and release. Even so, much remained to be done. The ship had to be brought safely to dock, her cargo secured and accounted for. Officers handled the formalities, while sailors readied the vessel for inspection. Those with the freedom to go ashore did so as soon as permission was granted, their steps unsteady on solid ground. Taverns and inns filled quickly with returning crew, their pockets heavy with pay long delayed. For many sailors, those first nights ashore were bittersweet. The comfort of a real bed, a hot meal, and familiar company brought joy. Yet the transition from ship to shore was not always easy. The habits of life at sea, rising with the bells, moving with the sway of the deck, always mindful of a duty, did not fade overnight. Some men found the bustle of the city overwhelming, the noise and press of people a jarring contrast to the steady rhythms of the ship. Reuniting with family brought its own complexities. Long absences had changed both the sailor and those waiting at home. Children might no longer recognize the gaunt figure in worn clothes. Sweethearts had sometimes moved on, assuming the worst when months passed without news. Wives and mothers, while joyful, often struggled to reconcile their hopes with the hardened, weather-beaten men who returned. For those without close ties, life ashore could be lonely. Many turned to the taverns, where rum and ale flowed freely, and stories of the voyage grew taller with each telling. Here, old shipmates gathered to toast absent friends, to mourn those lost, and to celebrate their own survival. Wages were spent quickly in these moments of release. The hard-earned coin from a long voyage vanishing in a haze of drink and laughter. Not all sailors stayed ashore for long. The call of the sea remained strong for many. Despite its dangers, the life of a sailor offered freedom, adventure, and a sense of purpose that life on land often lacked. Ships were always in need of hands, and press gangs were not the only recruiters. Voluntary enlistment, drawn by the promise of pay or the lure of distant horizons, filled the ranks once more. Yet each man carried the weight of his experiences. The scars of storms weathered, the losses of friends buried at sea, the hardships of foreign ports, all left their mark. Older sailors became the keepers of these stories, passing them to younger men eager to take their place aboard the next outbound vessel. In this way, the cycle of maritime life continued, each voyage adding new chapters to the long history of those who worked the sea. In time, even the roughest tales softened in the telling. The hunger, the fear, the endless labor gave way to memories of sunsets on the open ocean. The camaraderie of shipmates, the simple beauty of a starlit night far from land. These memories, cherished and retold, reminded sailors why they had returned again and again to the sea. As you rest now, imagine a weathered ship at anchor, her sails furled, her crew disembarking one by one. The port hums with life, yet beneath the noise, the quiet stories of countless sailors linger. The long voyage home is complete, its hardships and triumphs woven into the fabric of maritime history. And in the hearts of those who sailed, the sea will always call. Conclusion, and so we reach the end of our long and winding voyage, tracing the lives of those who braved the vast oceans during the age of exploration. Through hunger and scurvy, through storms and shipwrecks, through encounters with strange new worlds and the enduring grip of superstition, sailors faced trials that tested body and spirit alike. Yet they sailed on, bound by duty, by hope, and by the deep rhythm of the sea itself. As you rest now, imagine again the gentle sway of a ship upon calm waters. The timbers creak softly beneath your feet, the sails billow high above. Around you, the crew moves quietly, their voices low in the hush of early dawn. The horizon glows faintly, promising another day of wind and wave. There is no need for haste. The sea moves at its own pace, and the sailors move with it. Think of the countless ships that once crossed these waters, their names now faded from memory. Each carried its own stories of hardship endured, of courage found, of lives changed by the endless expanse of the ocean. The sailors who lived these stories have long since gone, their voices lost to time. But their journey lives on in the quiet roll of the tide, in the whisper of the wind across the waves. Let your mind drift to them now, carried gently on the currents of history. There is peace to be found in this steady motion, in the slow passage of time upon the sea. The hardships of the past remain distant, softened by the years. What remains is a deep respect for those who faced the unknown with such resolve. You are safe here, resting as the ship glides through calm waters. The stars wheel slowly overhead, the night air cool and gentle. Far below, the ocean holds its ancient secrets, vast and unknowable. There is nothing to fear, only the quiet comfort of knowing that, like the sailors of old, you too are part of a greater journey, moving always forward with the tide. And so, gentle listener, as our journey draws to a close, I invite you to let these stories of the sea settle softly in your mind. The sailors of the age of exploration have long since vanished over the horizon, their ships gone to the depths or to the sands of time. Yet their voices linger still, carried on the wind and woven into the great tapestry of history. Thank you for joining me tonight aboard this little voyage through the past. I hope you found calm in the rhythm of the waves, and perhaps a touch of wonder in the lives of those who once crossed the wide, empty sea. If you enjoyed this gentle journey and would like to set sail with me again, please do leave a comment below. I always love hearing what you think, even if it's just a sleepy little hello. And while you're here, don't forget to give this video a like, share it with a fellow night owl, and of course, subscribe to the Drowsy Historian because there are always more stories to tell, more quiet journeys to take, and I'd be honored to have you aboard for the next one. Until then, may your seas be calm, your dreams peaceful, and your nights filled with gentle rest. Good night and safe travels.